So previously we talked about the, kind of the basic foundation that contractors exist to build projects on one side, and it's people that design and build the projects on the other side. And the business of building is really about pulling the people together. That's where the manager comes in. So this is now where we start to pull together, here's what a contractor needs, and the project needs, and here's what a contractor needs, and here's what I need out of my career and my life. And the better we can pull those things together, the better off things run. And in today's talent market, really, it's talent that has more choices than contractors have choices of who they're going to hire.
Mhm.
So, and so I think it's more important than ever that the managers are really looking at it. And it's not about acquiescing to somebody and thinking that culture is about ping pong tables and beanbag chairs or anything like that. It's not. If you dive deeper even into the companies where you see that, that's like the visible exterior. That is not part of that's not what their culture is or what it's about. It is about building people and building a company as you go through it. So I think we need to go back and give ourselves a little bit of foundation to remind ourselves that there's these different progressive levels of growth and standards as we go along. And ultimately you're bringing somebody into a job to go perform work to within those standards. And that changes over time. So just want to run through this really quick. And we covered this, two or three episodes ago?
Yeah. We've done the deep dive. Yeah, you're right. Just a quick overview.
We've done that. But just to, kind of back up a quick, I guess, recap. Contractors go through these different stages of growth. Each one's about a tripling of headcount. And when they go through these different stages of growth, they're going to be delivering more projects to customers each year. Those projects are typically going to be larger and more complex, and they require more support, progressively more support systems. And that's kind of that wrapper around of those support systems. That's the business of building. Building the project is building the project. That's the core thing. And then there's the business of contracting, and that's largely what we're talking about here. And like we said, those happen with about 3 times every tripling of headcount.
Mhm.
You have to evolve the strategies for project types, for sizes, for velocity. So, for instance, contractor at stage 1, with maybe 5 employees or something, they're doing really small projects. They're working out of the back of pickup trucks. They're showing up to a job site. It might be residential. It might be light commercial, small projects. Get up into stage 3 where now you have 50, 75 employees, and you can go build some pretty decent projects. You're building progressively larger projects. Once you get up into stage 6 plus, where 1,500 employees or more, you're really looking at, you have to keep, that's a big machine. And I think this gets into your tornado description. This is the top of the tornado. It's huge. It's hundreds and hundreds of miles across, and yet the winds are still going a couple hundred miles an hour. And you have to keep that workforce busy. You have to keep them productive. So you're now looking at large construction programs like an entire campus build out, or a hospital that might have 3 new towers coming up over the next 20 years. And you're getting involved at that early stage of programming and design. And that's just a whole different level. So then with that, then there's these standards for performance, and the standards for performance to support those strategies, those have to evolve. And this is where, human meets company type of thing. And so we're going to dive into this a little bit more, as we go forward, and in terms of how it ties together the job role. But that first level of standard where everything starts is just subjective. It's a judgment. It's a person that has an idea and says thumbs up, thumbs down, and it's subjective judgment. All standards start there. There's nothing wrong with that. And as a company progresses forward, standards will become progressively clearer at a lower level of the organization for roles that have been in place for a long time. For instance, like a job foreman or something. But they will, at the very top levels, as you're adding new roles and everything, those new roles will have less clear standards, and that creates a whole different challenge for somebody moving into those roles. That's why this is important to cover. Second step is we've got some metrics. We now have something to measure. It's no longer thumbs up, thumbs down, right? It's metrics. It's a simple metric is a production rate, X number of cubic yards per hour. moving up into now, once we have that, then it's like, oh, how do we do this? So we have standards on a procedure. You do step 1, step 2, step 3, always in this sequence. If you get to step 4 and you go right or go left, either go to step 5 or go to step 7. So procedures, how do you do something? And that becomes another level of standard. A lot easier, obviously, if you can put somebody in a role and there's procedures in place for it. Those procedures are, and you described this one perfectly, that in the ideal world, I would love to set a standard of saying, I want to get, I don't know what a reasonable 100 feet an hour or something, if that's my production rate. I want a procedure to get me there 100% of the time. So that's fairy tale land. Once we get into the real world, we start to realize that getting to 100% tolerance likely costs more money, and there's more bureaucracy, more negative bureaucracy related to that than it is worth it to get to 100%. So now we say our variability range. So we say our average is this. Our high-low range is 90 to 110 per feet per hour, or whatever it happens to be. And so we understand what our variability ranges are, and our procedures then are designed to go to most predict that we are going to hit within that range. And then we start to look at it and go, we've got to go tie, for instance, we've got to tie this all together across the organization. And this sounds simple. It sounds simple, but it's definitely not easy to go do. So for instance, that production rate of 100 feet per hour, making sure that ties back to estimating. So from field operations to project management to estimating, that these things all flow together so that we are constantly estimating the jobs for exactly what we can produce it for in the field. And we have this feedback both from a market standpoint and from an actual field production standpoint. And we know how all that works. And then we can look at it and try and continually improve that. But when we don't, and we see that happen all the time, that's a struggle that every company goes through. Everybody wants to have estimating tie perfectly to operations, yet the workflows usually don't exist between those two. So, and then finally, you get up to this stage, your final stage of standards, which we'll get to, is where you have actual management systems in place for quality assurance, quality control, making sure that you have it. So maybe you don't have the fox watching the hen house. So I'm not like self-reporting on my production, because I know that if I'm self-reporting on my production, the day that I hit 120 feet per hour average, I'm going to report that one. The day that I hit 85 feet per hour, I'm probably not going to report it quite as clearly. And that's just human nature. It's okay. Or I may explain the rationale, because I may frame the rationale for why I got 85 feet per hour. I may explain that differently. It's important to start to separate those functions out so that somebody that's got some distance from it can go see what's actually happening and troubleshoot it. And I remember reading in Keyways magazine back in, I think it was 1996. I remember finding I don't know where it was. It was in a customer's office, but I picked it up and was reading it. And you had a really good article written where you had a field engineer that was tracking the production and really just observing haul trucks and everything like that. And they'd seen a process work on another job site. So a field engineer, not the superintendent, not the foreman, a field engineer had an idea that was able to, and I love the way you broke it down. I don't remember the exact numbers, but it increased productivity quite a bit just on the hauling. So that's the value of having those management systems in place. And that's a system at Kiewit. That's not that's not something that a person did. That's a system. So anyhow, how did I do describing that progression on standards? And are we good?
No, I think the progression was great. I think where I used to, and I know a lot of people do, is we actually get stuck a little bit on 2, because it's like, well, I'm measuring this, so I must have a procedure because I'm measuring it. So therefore, we must have it, right? They assume there's a procedure until you start to see, you start to notice in number 4, it's like, why is this crew getting 80 feet an hour and this one getting 110 feet an hour, and they're on the same job, same type of conditions, all that. A lot of times then they'll back up into number 3 and go, oh, because they're doing it differently, right? So a lot of times I think you jump around until you realize that you've missed a step.
Right.
And yeah, so you see the ranges, you come back, you do a procedure, right? You literally have your
Yeah.
checklist of things to do. And then again, you assume you have a workflow. It's like, well, no, you don't. But it takes a minute when they go back in and go, well, here's what it costs us to do this work on this job. Why aren't we estimating the same, for a similar job? It's like, well, how did that information get in here? How do we know? That's when they start to realize those connections don't exist. So I think the explanation's great. I just think people see it differently. They get to two, think
Yeah.
they're at four, they come back to three, and it takes a while to really steadily move, one through six.
Right.
I think there's a lot of up and down, a lot of jumping around until they figure it out.
I totally agree. Yeah, that's a great point because you're right. When you first do the procedure, when you when you look at it on a slide like this, it seems really simple.
Yeah.
In real life, it's not that easy because you're walking forward into it. So when you, like you said, you get to step two, I don't know there's a step six, and I can't even really imagine a step six for this at this point in time because I'm barely figuring out two. So I just put two in place, and I think that I'm done,
Mm,
and then I get to three and I get to four, but I've got, oh, maybe my metrics actually need to change. Maybe my procedures need to change. So it is a constant cycle each time. And the process in and of itself to keep up with this is really, really hard.
yeah.
So anyways, and that progressively also gets better over time as the company grows and matures. But yeah, you're right. So it's a cycle. Great. Good point. Yep. Not a static environment. So
Exactly, exactly.